Hello, and welcome to the webinar, When Cancer Changes Our Relationships with Our Children. I'm Aisha McClellan. I'm the Cervical Cancer Program Coordinator at SHARE. Before the presentation begins, I'd like to tell you a little bit about SHARE. SHARE is a national nonprofit that supports, educates, and empowers anyone who has been diagnosed with women's cancers and provides outreach to the general public about signs and symptoms, because no one should have to face breast, ovarian, uterine, cervical, or metastatic breast cancer alone. For more information about upcoming webinars, support groups, and our helplines, please visit our website at sharecancersupport.org. All participants will be muted during the presentation. Once Haley finishes presenting, we will begin the Q&A discussion. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the Q&A section, at the bottom of your screen. Remember that Haley is unable to give specific medical advice, so please keep your questions general in nature. We also have closed captioning available. You can enable this feature by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and selecting the subtitle option. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the SHARE website soon. Now I'd like to hand things over to today's speaker, Dr. Alex Buckley.
It's okay. I actually have a PhD, so I am a doctor, just not a medical doctor. So.
Dr. Haley Pollack.
Oh, great. I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Haley Pollack. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Bright Spot Network. Bright Spot is an organization dedicated to supporting young parents and guardians with cancer as they raise small children. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of what we do in a moment. I'm a cancer survivor, and I'll also talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But Bright Spot was really started from a resource gap that myself and my co-founder experienced ourselves firsthand while navigating our own cancer diagnosis. I am a doctor. I have a PhD in history, but I'm here today to talk about how cancer changes our relationship with our children, how it can change our relationship with our children. I live in Oakland, California. I have 2 kids, husband and a dog, and I'm a knitter, and I am just thrilled to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Always a little nervous about sharing it, but let's see. Okay, so here we are. Great. So when cancer changes our relationship with our children. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to say a little bit more about myself, talk a little bit more about Bright Spot Network, the impact of cancer on a family. For many of you on today's webinar, that is something you maybe know very close. It might be firsthand knowledge. What might your child need in the kind of specter of the cancer diagnosis, how your child might respond to your diagnosis, how you might talk to your child, ways to help them cope, and ways to help them connect. So, like I said, a little bit more about me. So I'm a cancer survivor. In 2018, at 37, I was diagnosed with stage 3C colon cancer. And like I'm sure many of the folks on the call, the first thing I thought when they told me I had cancer was, what about my kids? I had a 6-month-old baby and a 3-year-old at the time of my diagnosis. I had just returned from my parental leave. Excuse me. I just returned from my parental leave. So I was nursing and pumping at work and just all of the things, getting up in the night and dealing with a 3-year-old. So it was all of those things were so front and center for me. And it wasn't until I was connected to another young mom who also had, she was diagnosed while pregnant and had a 3-year-old at the time, that things really started to kind of connect and come together for me. And I started to have a better understanding of what was really like happening for me. And from our relationship, Bright Spot Network was born. And like I said before, I am now the executive director of Bright Spot Network, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the other part of my story is my mom, who she was diagnosed with cancer when I was 16. And obviously this is a picture of me and her when I was little, but I love it because I'm kissing my kid in like in a similar way. So I always just really love that picture and seeing them next to each other. really like warms my heart. So my mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 16, and it came back when I was 18, and she passed away when I was 25. And so, I really thought when I was diagnosed with cancer at 37 that I knew what cancer could steal from a family, but kind of being on the other end, I've learned a lot since then. And I feel like having those two ends of the spectrum, unfortunately, has taught me a lot. So I want to just like foreground before we even get any further. I just want to foreground this discussion with, yes, cancer can change your relationship with your children, but it's also an opportunity to deepen your relationship with your children. For both, my little kids as well as myself and my mom, I feel like there was an opportunity there that I don't wish on anybody, but it's an opportunity that if you're faced with it, to find the ways that you can kind of like get the reins, and hopefully some of what we're talking today will help bring us all there. So a little bit about Bright Spot Network. So Bright Spot Network provides young cancer survivors who are parents of small children with a safe space for individual and familial healing and reconnection. We focus on parents primarily under 45 with preschool age children 0 to 6, including those diagnosed while pregnant. We have a bunch of programs. We have a book program called Bright Reads, where we send free books in the mail, books about cancer, grief and loss, and big emotions. A Bright Box, which is an art box that we send in the mail, and we hear things like, "This was the first time I felt like a mom again." All of the pieces are included. We have a $500 barrier-free grant that you can apply for online, and you have to be in active treatment or within a year of diagnosis, and you have to have a child 0 to 6 years old at home. We have support groups for parents in active treatment, parents with stage 4 cancers, partners, as well as a support group for long-term survivors. We have opportunities for kids to connect. We have a kids group that's sort of like a circle time called Bright Circle, where kids and their parents can come together and connect with other kids. And we have another group called Bright Club, where it's kids 5 to 12 to connect with other kids whose parents have cancer, to learn coping skills and do art and kind of, mindfulness activities together. Webinars similar to this one, and wellness and writing workshops, things like that. We have a clinician on staff who will do a family resource navigation with a parent or a family, help them to, gain some skills about talking to their kids about cancer, as well as perhaps like more material supports that they might need. And we have tons of web resources. So I'll throw the web address into the sorry, I'm just checking oh, here it is. I will throw the web address into the chat, and it is already in there. So thank you so much for doing that. So let's get into it. Oops. How do I tell? What do you think excuse me, let's dive in. So like I said, when I was diagnosed with cancer, my first thoughts were of my kids, and I know that I'm not the only one. When you're a parent that's diagnosed with cancer, so often your first thoughts are, how do I tell them? What do I tell them? How do I protect them? And how do I shield them from cancer? And the truth is, like with any big event in your life, whether or not it's something that you're really excited about or proud of, or something that might be scary like cancer, it's going to change the way that your family functions. And some of that's going to be positive, and some of that might be difficult. But regardless of how it changes, it's not linear. Sometimes it's going to be hard, and sometimes it's just going to be full of, cuddles and hugs and things like that. And so today we're just going to talk about how to deepen those relationships and take this opportunity to figure out how to, really kind of handle this, what's in front of us, the cancer diagnosis, the elephant in the room. And a lot of that is by building trust. But first, I'm going to tell you something that you probably already know, which is, well, first, that there's an estimated 2.85 million U.S. children that are living with a parent who's been diagnosed with cancer. And then I'm going to tell you something that you already know, which is that a cancer diagnosis is closely tied to children's emotional life, their increased risk for problems of emotional, social, cognitive, behavioral, and potential physical functioning domains. And so that's something that you probably already know, and that's part of probably why you're here. And we're gonna get into that. So when cancer comes into a family, it turns up the volume on what's already there. So some of the hard things that are already happening in a family, like perhaps financial stress or access to resources, workplace stress that a parent might have, support, whether or not it's the, lack of support, maybe no local ties, perhaps it's a single parent family, depression or other mental illness, substance abuse, other medical issues that might be happening for the parent, the child, or someone else in the family, strained relationships in the family communication, or self-esteem. All of these kind of difficult things that might be happening in a family, cancer can turn up the volume. And oftentimes younger families are even higher at risk because things like there might be greater financial stress, less safety net kind of already built into a family. So just important to know that this is there, that it kind of can just like make a little bit louder some of the things that are already happening in a family. But there's also things that are already working in your family. Not every family is going to have all of these things. You might have one, you might have two, you might have three, and you might not have any. And that's okay. These are things that we can all be building towards, even in the midst of a cancer diagnosis. Things like an established sense of trust and belonging for a child in a family, strong family and peer bonds, an emotional vocabulary and expression, family functionality that was happening pre-cancer, connections to outside support, and resilience that are happening in a family. And so these are all pieces that are going to help to build the strong relationships that are going to, that cancer might change the relationships, but we hope that they will continue to help bond and bring people together. So I'm just going to read these quotes, and I really love these quotes, and I hope that they speak to you as much as they do to me. So the greatest gift you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them. And this next one. Our job is to walk with our children through their difficult moments with connection and empathy, allowing them to feel to be active participants in problem solving and to discover the depth of their own capacity. It's out of our deep love for our children that we want to protect them, but their capacity will be greater if we allow that love to lead us to our own courage so that we can feel strong enough to let them discover their own strengths. So I just love these quotes as a reminder for what we can do for our kids, which is to help walk them through this process. We want to, as parents, we want to shield our children. We want to protect them. But part of protecting them is actually giving them the tools to build resilience in the face of something hard. And in this moment, that face of something hard might be cancer, but these are tools that are going to stay with them throughout their lives as they face other challenging moments in their lives. And in order to find and build resiliency, we need something that we're working against. And so stress in that case is something that's necessary for growth and resilience. So I see a question here. I'm just going to check it out before I move on. Okay, I'm going to answer this one. Sorry. Okay. So what do children need? And then this is kind of to answer that question, which was, are there any landmines or anything that we should really be looking out for? And so these are things that are going to be true for little kids as well as for, young adult and even adult children. So what do children need? They need safe, reliable, and compassionate caregivers, consistent routines and structure, open, honest, and developmentally appropriate communication. So these are going to be the building blocks for that resiliency, to help them through that journey, your cancer journey. At the core of that is you. So parents have a unique expertise in their children. So you're going to know, some of what your children need. And there's going to be moments where, you're going to look for professional help, and you're going to have to filter that through your gut. And we'll talk a little bit more about, particular moments of distress and things like that. But your children best, and you should always come back to that. You might not always have all of the answers to their questions, but just being there and having the attention and willingness to talk is going to be the most important thing for them. And that you can also role model your own big feelings and coping tools. That's going to be invaluable for them to see, and for you to talk about your emotions when they come up, and help them to talk about their emotions when they come up. And that's true for little kids. And it's also true for, middle schoolers and teens and even adults. And then honesty really is the best policy. You want to be honest with your kids in age appropriate and developmentally appropriate ways. So I'm just going to go through some kind of just quick developmental stuff, starting with infants and toddlers and going up through teens, just to give you a sense of some of what's like a developmentally appropriate response to how a child might respond to cancer. So with like an infant and a toddler, they're not going to understand cancer or what's going on, but they do understand that something's changed. They'll feel the routine changes. They'll be able to see how day-to-day things may have changed. They'll be aware that there's a change in behavior or feelings around them. And so what you might experience as a parent is more tantrums, changes in sleeping, changes in eating, and increased separation anxiety. And even with infants and toddlers, you can talk to them. I know for me, when I had an infant, and I spent a lot of time talking to my infant about my cancer. And it was a really, really important way for me to connect with her, but also for her to connect with me. Talking to your kids, talking to your infant is going to be helpful for their developmental, language development. And it's also going to help them to feel connected to you. With a preschooler, generally, they might understand like an illness, like a cold, right? Or just being sick, but they're not going to understand the seriousness of an illness like cancer. Also, for starting in preschool, there's like a certain type of magical thinking that happens that they caused cancer. So, they might blame themselves. I wouldn't go to sleep and I kept mommy awake and she was so tired. And I think that I made her sick, right? And so what you might experience on the preschooler's age is regressive behavior, like accidents if they are already toilet changed, bursts of emotion. Maybe those are, maybe they feel like temper tantrums, like a younger child. They might be very insistent in asking the same questions over and over and over and even over again. They might have more intense separation anxiety than usual. And they also might want to play it out, playing with themes of doctors, nurses, medicine, or other types of, playing out family dynamics, which is great. And so all of these things, these are all like, quote, normal responses to a cancer diagnosis. And, again, you're the parent. And so you're going to know if like something that's, periodic accidents for a toilet trained child, when that becomes something that, you might start to worry about. Whereas something like playing it out is like a normal response that's actually really helpful for kids to start to, kind of work through some of the emotions that might be coming up for them. For older kids, kind of early elementary school age kids, they can usually understand the difference between a simple illness like a cold and a serious illness like cancer, but they may have never had any experience with cancer, never heard the word before. So, there's that. They may have, on the other hand, they may have misinformation about cancer. They may think that cancer is contagious. They may think that anybody that has cancer dies. And then again, with school age kids, they also have a magical thinking. They might think that they did something to cause the cancer. I wasn't behaving when mommy told me to stop doing something. And I yelled at her and I said something really mean and I really stressed her out, and now mommy is sick. And so your child could respond to your cancer in a whole bunch of different ways. Again, regression, they might act younger than they are, like baby talk or wetting the bed, things like that. There might be intense worrying about the person who is living with cancer, as well as other people around them. And that could be a fear of just like illness in general. A lot of questions about physical changes, but also questions about routines and things like that as well. They may show anger if their day-to-day routine is changed because of cancer, unable to drive to a dance practice because, the parent is too tired, or maybe if there's another family member involved, maybe they're, doing something else to help and can't, take a kid to soccer. There may be, again, separation anxiety that perhaps you hadn't seen in a while. School-age kids are also using their imagination and playing it out, again, playing with themes of doctors, nurses, and medicine, things like that. And that's really good for them to work through some of these emotions. And they may also distance themselves from the sick parent because of fear or discomfort. And that can feel really painful for that parent, even if it's a normal response. Middle school kids are going to have a little bit more understanding of cancer. Maybe they've heard of cancer. They might have known somebody else with cancer, outside of the family. They may have friends who have that are comfortable talking about a family member's cancer. They also might have, again, misinformation about cancer. They may, again, think cancer is contagious and that everyone who has cancer dies. And again, middle schoolers, even though they're older, they still have magical thinking that they may have done something to cause the cancer. I haven't been doing well in school and my teachers have been calling home and I've been getting bad grades or whatever it might be. I've been making mom upset. She's super stressed out and that stress made her sick, right? And so it's all kind of coming back to them causing the cancer, which, can be very painful and kind of stressful for the kid. So your middle schooler could respond to your cancer by showing anger, which maybe a middle schooler is doing anyway, but, showing anger if their normal day-to-day routine is being changed because of cancer, unable to drive to dance practice again, because the parent's too tired or some other kind of family relation can't help them because of the cancer parent. They may hide their feelings from their family and friends, not want to talk about it. They may be really worried that other people will become sick and start to have like anxiety about illnesses. They could show fear and sadness as anger and often directed at a family member. And that can, feel painful, obviously, to family members. And they could feel really embarrassed by the sick parent because they're different. And that can also be painful for the parent. So it's just things to kind of be thinking through and how a child might respond. And then teens. So teens are going to have a basic understanding of what cancer is. They're going to be able to understand medical aspects of cancer, but they also might have misinformation about cancer. They still might think cancer is contagious. They still might think that everybody who has cancer dies. But in general, teens are often thinking about these like big things. And so they're thinking a lot about like the meaning of life and life and death and things like that. So, where cancer kind of fits into that is gonna, it's gonna hold a kind of heavy place in their sort of thinking about kind of the way the world works. So for teens who are already kind of in this place where they're trying to find their, they're trying to kind of figure out their relationship to their family, to school, to all of these, other institutions, and to their own self as they like individuate. There might be a struggle to remain close to family as they gain independence. They may show fear and sadness and anger, often directed towards a family member. They may not share feelings or talk openly with family or friends about their cancer experiences, despite, how much a parent might want that. And they might take their frustration or anger out on family members. And just like a sidebar, because I was a teenager when my mom was diagnosed, I just want to say that I really, I was not the best teenager, and I wasn't always, I sit with this a lot. I wasn't always as kind to my parents, and especially to my mom, as I wish I had been. And me and my mom were really, really close as, I sort of got older and sort of started to have my own understanding of her illness. And so I just want to say that there are these moments of these like inflection points or these inflection moments with your kids, but that is just a moment, that there's all these other moments to either repair or to build or to come together to connect. But of course, something to be on the lookout for are signs of distress. So is my kid just like functioning in their life? And as this child's parent, you are always going to be the person who knows your child best. And so there are some things to be on the lookout for, kind of like the big four are development, and development, especially in young kids. Like if it seems like, and you should be talking to your child's doctor about this, but if it does seem like there's any sort of like developmental shifts, you do want to make sure that you're talking to your doctor and that that's being taken care of. But, is your kid, not wanting to go to school, things like that? Are they sleeping enough? Are they eating enough? You really want to make sure that these things, that you're paying attention to these things, because those are going to be potentially like markers of how they're doing. But again, you're their parent. So there might be things outside of these that tell you how they're doing. And excuse me. And there also might be, for one person, their kid might act one way, and that might be something that makes them call a professional. And for another parent, that might not, be a sign of distress. So, you really know your child the best. And so these are things that you should be looking out for. But in the end, again, it's like a gut check for you. Another just thing to be on the lookout for is just persistent change in mood or patterns of behavior. So, exploding or withdrawing might be opportunities to try to check in. And of course, always individual and family therapy. This is something that you can do at the time of your diagnosis, and at any time past that. There isn't, there might be a point where you decide to seek out professional therapy, but you can always do that earlier as well. Okay. So one of the best ways to connect to your kids through your cancer diagnosis is by talking to them. Here are like the kind of like big three things to be to be on the lookout or to remind your kids as you're starting to talk to them. First of all, cancer is not your fault. So, going back to that magical thinking of, I did X, it made, mommy feel Y, cancer is my fault. You really want to make sure that your kid knows cancer is not your fault. There's no behaviors, words, or thoughts that could make anybody get cancer. So that's really, really important. And that's something that you can talk about, over and over again. Cancer is not contagious. And this is especially like in this moment of COVID, cancer is not contagious is really, kind of important to remember. So try to avoid using words like sick in describing cancer, since it makes kids think of the cold, flu, or COVID. Using the word cancer actually can be really empowering, both for you as a patient or a survivor, as well as for the kid, because especially for little kids, like they don't have any association with cancer. For them, cancer is just is just a word. So sick could become something scary, like, oh, if I get sick, I might also have to I might lose my hair or something like that. So you want to be careful about using sick to describe your cancer. And then no matter what happens, you will be loved and cared for. And this also requires you to make a plan. So, is your kid, does your kid have like the proper childcare for if you're at the hospital or in chemotherapy, things like that. So, these are like the big three things that you can keep on coming back to when you're talking to your kid. As well, when you're talking to your kids, you want to just be building on the foundation of trust that you already have with them. So letting them know that any question is okay to ask, and so that you've created a safe space to talk. So, that they can feel like they're coming back to you and back to you and back to you. Because when you talk to them about your cancer, it's not going to be one question and one conversation. It's going to be many, many conversations over time. You want to let your kids know that you're going to keep them informed. So you may need time to process your own diagnosis or a plan or whatever. You might need to rehearse your conversation with them, but you want to keep them informed. And yet you have the hard work of telling them enough, but not everything. And you're their parent. And so you're going to know what that is. But, on the next slide, I talk a little bit more about this, but, when you have the hard work of being, that there's a developmental appropriateness in the conversations that you're having with them. So you want to be able to, tell them about your cancer, but not necessarily use like baby words, but also not, be super clinical. And that's hard. So that's the reason, I suggest perhaps rehearsing it before the first time you talk to your kids. Just letting your kids know that you'll always be honest with them. And if you don't know the answer to something, you can say that, and that you're having a conversation with them, and that you want them to be able to come back to you again and again and again. So you're going to be honest with your kids about the good and the bad and the ugly, and that you want your kids just to be able to come back to you. Okay. So here are just some tips. You want to be developmentally appropriate. And, as I was kind of fumbling through on the last slide, you can be honest without giving clinical notes or using baby language. So avoiding euphemisms as well is really important. So cancer isn't necessarily a scary word for kids. You don't want to give the word more power than it needs to have. But similarly, euphemisms are important to avoid, especially with little kids. Something like, you don't want to, if you are having a conversation with a child about death and dying, you don't want to say that, you don't want to compare death and dying to going to sleep, because that could cause undue stress for a child about sleep. Your kids are unique. And so not every child's going to respond to a conversation about cancer the same way. And you're going to want to approach your children differently. So some kids are going to be really hungry for the biology behind cancer, while other kids want to know the details of like what it's like to get chemo. You walk through the door, you meet with a nurse, all of that kind of like, really kind of the details of it. Other kids are going to want to know the broad strokes. And they might come back multiple times to get a little bit more. And you're going to know your kid, and you're going to approach your kid as the unique, beautiful human that they are. Be sure to, expect the unexpected. It's not going to go exactly as planned, and that's okay. And that this is just the first conversation of many. And the fact that you're having this conversation truly is the most important part. You want to make sure that you're managing your message. So think about who you've told and who you want to bring into the conversation. So for instance, you might want to talk to your kid's school, because your kid's school is going to be the person who sees your kid from, like 8 to 3 every day. And so they might notice changes in behavior. But given that, you want to make sure that that, if you're telling your child's teacher something, that it's not different, or, if it is different information than your child knows, you just want to make sure that your teacher is aware. On the other hand, for some kids, they might want to talk to their friends about it, and you might want to help your child with language to help your child to explain it to their friends, or you might want to send an email out to your friends, to your child's friends' parents as well, just so that they're aware, of what's going on at home, so that you can manage the message and really help your kid to be supported by their kind of whole community. And then, of course, wash, rinse, repeat. This is just the beginning. It's going to happen multiple times over and over again. Okay, I love this quote. Life is not fair. Life hurts. Life is good. These 3 seemingly incompatible expressions are really 3 parts of the whole of living. They are threads woven through the tapestry each one of us creates as the visible expression of our being part of humanity. To accept these three is not to abandon hope or optimism or to deny our real grief. To accept them is to rid ourselves of the unnecessary suffering that comes from struggling against these three truths and trying to make them something that they're not. So uncertainty is, at the core of at the core of all of this and the core of our kids' stress in these moments. And so we have to help them through this process and to walk them through this journey. And so I'm going to suggest some potential ways to help kids cope through this. And these are just some ideas, and I would love to hear some of the ways that you all are helping your kids cope. But the uncertainty of a cancer diagnosis is hard for the whole family. And so one suggestion is keeping a schedule, keeping a visual calendar. So keeping a schedule is going to be important for all kids, for teenagers as well as really little kids, but a suggestion for kind of school aged and younger, I think even older kids, but especially for those school age and younger kids, is a visual calendar. So these are made by Mighty and Bright, and they actually have one specific for cancer. So you can put a little magnet or a sticker that says, mom is going to go to the hospital on Monday or whatever it might be. But it also might be you're going to go to Nana's house on Wednesday, So having that visual representation actually can help alleviate a lot of the stress and the uncertainty that might just be coming up from, the cancer diagnosis and some of the hush tones in the house and things like that. And in fact, seeing that schedule is going to help empower a child as they know and have a better understanding of what's happening in their world. But similarly, with an older kid, like a teenager, trying to maintain a schedule is going to be really, really important for them to just feel empowered and good in their experience as well. So keeping, soccer practice as regular as possible, if possible. For younger kids, just playing it out and having a variety of toys to help them play it out is going to be really key. So, like I said earlier, medical play is really, really helpful for kids, but same things with play money. If there might be a lot of financial worries in your home, having the opportunity for a kid to play some of that out by themselves or even with you can be really helpful. So just things that, might represent your family, whether or not it's a dollhouse or other, things that they can build, medical equipment, dolls, things like that are all great. Play reflects an emotional reality, not an exact retelling of a real event. So your child is likely to play out the story just the right way for their own needs. And I'll just say that, last year I had a friend who had a prophylactic mastectomy, and she's a dear friend. And I was telling my daughter that she was going to be in the hospital. And an hour later, my daughter came out with a Lego, visiting somebody in a hospital bed. And I was really blown away because she had clearly been, just playing through our dear friend being in the hospital. And also, the only time she's ever been in a hospital room was to visit me during my cancer surgery. So just to say that these are ways to continue the process. Art and artistic expression. This is good for kids of all ages, whether, maybe you choose to do it as a family. There can be, you could write, you could do collage, paint, sculpture, a whole bunch of other stuff. You could do a family drawing or do Play-Doh monsters and talk about feelings. You could draw a family flag or a crest that could hang in your window. These are all ways just to help kids both express themselves through the cancer, but also to bond the family as well. Of course, things like breathing and guided imagery, yoga, mindfulness jars. These are really, really, really good ways to help kids to just soothe that anxiety, and might be stuff that they already have kind of going on in different places in their life as well. Information. So kids' books about cancer are really, really great. And as well, if you're want your child to be talking more about death and dying, there's a lot of really good books for kids about death and dying. Those are all available. They're not all available, but there's a really comprehensive list on the Bright Spot Network website as well with different ages, and it's a really great list. And here's just some ways to connect, right? So those are ways to help kids cope, but one of the most important ways to help kids cope is by them connecting with you through your treatment or whatever might be going on for you. So you're so tired, you're on the couch, you're in bed, you really don't have the capacity to actually, do very much. That's okay. Kids of all ages want to help. So, you might have a toddler and you might ask them to rub your feet. You might have a teenager and you ask them to get you your laptop or whatever it might be, right? But kids of all ages want to help, and that's a really, really great way for them to connect to you. You can watch TV or listen to a podcast together. You can read together, play games, whether or not it's board games or I Spy or 20 questions or cards. Those are things that you can do together on the couch when you're not feeling great. Still ways that you can connect. You can cuddle. And I just want to put a plug out there for this book, Horizontal Parenting, which is not written for parents with cancer, but basically is written for parents with cancer, because it's basically ways, really creative and awesome ways that you can, just parent from the couch and parent from being horizontal. So it's a really, really awesome book. And I was just talking to a parent recently who had, I think, 6-year-olds when she was diagnosed, and she said that there was these moments during her diagnosis that she was just so tired. She would just let her kids just run the Hot Wheels all over her body, and that they still talk about it, so something for her that felt very I'm so tired, this is the most I can do, is actually a really connective moment for kids. And part of that is because physical connection is really important. So first, some days you might not be able to get 10 minutes in with your kid, but if you're able to get 10 minutes of quality time with your kid, phone down, hopefully no screens, but maybe it's just 10 minutes watching TV with them where you're holding hands or just being really present with one another, that's going to be really good. And that's true for kids of all ages. Again, physical connection is just really helpful for kids to feel connected. And, there might be reasons that physical connection is hard for you, whether or not it's a surgery or, some other sensitivity. You can talk to your kid about ways that do feel good to touch you. And that's another way to kind of help them, bring them into the fold and into the conversation. So it might be, for a little kid, you're talking about ways that feel good to touch you as, be as gentle as a butterfly. Or, you might show them by touching their hand and giving them, a sense of what it means to be really gentle with you. And for an older child, you can have a more honest conversation about it. It hurts when X, and that again is another way to kind of connect with them and have a conversation about your cancer. Remember, it's quality, not quantity. You don't have to be going at 110, you can just, this 10 minutes is really a great amount of time to connect to a child. And just do something together. So maybe it's go to the movies, but do something together, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you need to talk. And this is especially true for teenagers. As we know, maybe you're driving somewhere together, and that's it. It's just being together is going to be that connective tissue that is really good for you and your teen. And there's also really great ways to connect specifically around cancer. So reading kids' books about cancer is really good. Again, the medical play, but taking an older child to the clinic with you can help them to, and of course, your child best. This is not going to be appropriate for every child, but for some kids, some older kids, taking them with you to the clinic might be really kind of lift the veil and help them to understand what that's like. Maybe they meet the nurses, all of that kind of stuff might be really, really helpful for them. Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions, but I have 5 quotes that I really want to share. I started this talk saying yes, your relationship with your kids is going to change, but that there's an opportunity here to, think about how you may become closer. And so my colleague, Carissa Hodgson, did some research with some families that she had been working with at a previous job. And she shared these quotes with me to share with you all today. And I just love them. So it changed my relationship with my mom. We don't focus on the little things we used to fight about, like doing the dishes. If she would ask me, normally I would have started an argument. And now I just do the dishes. I think it brought my mom and me a lot closer. We're buddies, great friends. Cancer makes you realize that you definitely don't know what you have until it's gone or it's almost gone. Cancer fast-tracked the growing up process. An appreciation for days and time together was embraced. We no longer complained or focused on things that didn't really matter. We talked more openly and valued family time much more. My daughter is more sympathetic to those that are experiencing a similar situation. It's definitely taught her empathy. We understand the importance now of being in the present and doing what we can when we can as a family. So, and then there's a book called My Parent Has Cancer and It Really Sucks. And it's aimed at middle school or really teenagers. And it says that they did a poll, 74% of the poll said cancer brought their family closer together. So with that, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here and sharing this time with me. Again, my name is Haley Pollack, Executive Director of Bright Spot Network. There's my email. Please, please, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about anything I talked about or any of the resources that Bright Spot has to offer. And so now I'm going to stop sharing, and I think we have some questions.
Thank you. That was great. As a parent of teenagers navigating a cancer diagnosis myself, I learned a lot. This is great. Thank you. So let's start the Q&A. You can still submit questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We will try to get through all of those submitted questions, but we may not be able to due to time constraints. So please discuss the challenges for single parents diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah, being a single parent, there's definitely other heightened stress of potentially not having the, just as much support inside a home as a two-parent family. And so I would just say that it's one of those moments to ask for help as much as you can. I know that sometimes we don't always think about our kids' schools as places of support, but our kids' schools really are. Our teachers often have access to outside, referrals for psychologists and other folks like that can be really, really helpful. I would also just say rely on the support that you do have and just don't be scared to ask for help.
Yeah. Can you please provide recommended readings, resources, websites to engage children?
Sure. I would say that, that does kind of depend on the age of the kids, but so obviously Bright Spot Network, you have little kids. But otherwise, I would say really look towards your Gilda's clubs, your local cancer care kind of affiliates. They oftentimes have youth and family programming, and those are really great opportunities to connect with other families. And if you're in the Chicago area, Pickles Group has in-person family opportunities to connect with kids to kids, and they also have an online program that meets quarterly.
Okay. How do you prepare your children for possible death?
That's so hard, and I'm so sorry that you're thinking through this, but I also know that however hard it is, the fact that you're thinking about it so deeply now is gonna better prepare your kid for potentially a parent's death or whatever might they face in the future. So I would have a few suggestions. One is I'm a really big fan of the Dougie Center. They work with bereaved kids, but they also have a program called the Pathways Program, which is support for kids as well as adults with life-limiting and advanced illnesses. And so I would really suggest going there. They have a lot of suggestions on their website. But things that you can do is just, to the best of your ability, like prepare yourself in terms of like getting the trusts and wills and all of that in order now, so that, if you are really worried that, death is something that's imminent, but that you're not kind of dealing with the legal stuff when you really want to be dealing with like the personal stuff, right? And, just talking to your kids, and everything that I was kind of talking about was really about cancer, but I think that you can extend that to also talking about death and dying.
Thank you. How do I cope with my kids not being in the same country as I am because of my treatment?
That seems really hard. I think, I don't know like how old the kids are there, but definitely like if you're able to talk to your kids, I think that that's the main sort of suggestion. I know for little kids, I was talking with a parent recently who had a bone marrow transplant. And so she was away from her kids for, that kind of like 100-day period where you're isolated. And she was saying that she thought that she would just do FaceTime with her kids, and that would just be the way that they connected. But like, if you know a little kid, like they don't do FaceTime well, like they take the phone and it's at the ceiling and they're just like messing around, right? Because they have access to this phone all of a sudden. And she was saying that like what she ended up doing, that was a learning experience for her. And so that wasn't feeling connected for her, but it also, I don't think was feeling connected for them. And so what she started to do was read to them on FaceTime. And so, that's something I think you could apply to like older kids too. Like what's something that you could do with an older kid? Maybe you like read a book with them, maybe you're both listening to an audiobook, or you're both watching the same television show. Maybe you're even doing like, like what is it like on Netflix? You can do like a watch party, just like think about things that you can do with your kid that you don't have to be in the same place for, but then you can connect about, because that's going to be, the way that you can really like bond.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you. How can I make my sons understand the gravity of my diagnosis? They think I'm fine because I look normal.
I mean, yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I think that it's a matter of just like maintaining that open communication and, letting them know that like, I think just being as developmentally appropriate and honest as you can be there. It might be that they actually do understand more than they're letting on. But I think that again, it's just like that open communication.
Sure. Do you have any strategies to manage concerned and anxious adult children who are torn between role reversal, orders, and trust?
I mean, I would just say that like for older kids, or not older, like adult children, that role reversal is a real is something to really like be on the lookout for, because you want, your child, they're gonna like want to help, but at the same time, you do want to make sure that they're not, becoming in the parent role. And so I would see if any ways that you can like manage that relationship so that if you're able to get other support as well, I would just say bring in that other support so that you're able to, maintain a kind of like healthy bond with them. They don't have to feel the stress of your cancer. And that might be a time where, I'm all about open communication and honesty, but you might want to also just like make sure that what you're sharing with them is, is appropriate to be sharing with your kids.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how long after treatment can developmental issues occur? I've been out of treatment as little as over 2 years, and my son is having issues, tantrum, etc. Wants to only spend time with his dad, which is hurtful. How long after can we attribute bad behavior to what it's witnessed through the diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, that's really hard. it's like, it might not be a direct correlation, but I say this like tongue in cheek, but like sometimes I talk about my relationship with my older daughter, who was 3 when I was diagnosed and is almost 8 now, 7.5. And, I always say, like, I ruined her life one time when I had a baby, and then I ruined it again by having cancer. And so like, it's like that has continued to be something in our relationship that we've had to like work through. And I don't know that every like challenge in our relationship can be directly like linked to the fact that I had cancer, but I don't not think so. And so I think that, just being really aware of it, like you already are, is great. It might be, if it's something that's been going on for a while, it might be an opportunity to look for professional help. Just in terms of parenting strategies, there might be like just ideas out there that, really specific ideas that might be able to help you to connect with your child in new ways that maybe you hadn't been thinking of before.
I think we have time for a couple more. So I'm going to try to put these two together. So when your children don't want to talk about your cancer diagnosis, or they're in denial, how do you navigate those situations?
Well, so you never want to push, right? Because you don't want to like push. I mean, we all know what happens when you push like a teenager, like, right? So you don't want to push your kid to like the edge with that. But I think it's really about like maintaining that like openness, right? So that they can come back with questions. Because the reason that they're reluctant, or the reason they're resistant, I imagine, is because of a deep love and like fear about what's happening. And so just maintaining that open communication, or not open, open communication, but open, door policy is going to be what's really important. And I think also going back to some of those connective, what are things you like to do together? Because like figuring out some like connective moments are going to potentially open up more opportunities that maybe they will feel comfortable talking,
What are some good strategies to stay strong for your children during your diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, that's so hard. I would just say, I think that like when I talk to parents, and from my own experience, that staying strong is just finding out what you need, right? And like sometimes that's like cuddles, like, and just like watching TV with your kid and like letting it go. I mean, my kids started calling macaroni and cheese Mama's Special, like, boxed macaroni and cheese. But like, I come back to that as an example because, now if I get out macaroni and cheese, they're like, Mama's Special, yes. And it's like a special thing in our family that like, I don't really cook that much. And also that like this happened, during my cancer, was that like, this became this special thing. And so I would just say like, let go as much of you as you can of that like mom guilt, all of that, like just do the things that are going to help you to survive this moment, because that is actually what's going to help your kids.
Absolutely. All right, I think this will be the last one. So diagnosed with breast cancer in 2016, my kids were 6 and 3. They cry if I get sick as if they think I'm going to die.
That's so hard. I mean, I think, and I know that I'm really like, it's like a broken record over here, but, whatever you can do to just like help them feel more secure, like whether or not it's talking to them or just, continuing to connect. But I also think like, I just want to say again, like that might be, again, another opportunity for professional support, and just like perhaps like a parenting, somebody to help you with some of those parenting moments, because like you and your kids experience something that's really heavy, and like looking for help and asking for help in these moments is going to be really key to maintaining a, healthy bonded family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. Is there a specific good children's book you recommend?
Oh, there's so many, and we're just at time. I would just go on the Bright Spot website. We have a bunch that are really, really amazing, and just take a look at those. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Haley, for an informative program, and thanks to all of you for participating and asking questions. Make sure to check out Oops. Make sure to check out Share's upcoming educational programs and support groups and follow us on social media. Please take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. The survey will show up in the browser when the webinar ends, and the link will also be in the follow-up email. This concludes the webinar. Bye.